So what year was your incident? And you have a very, very famous incident that's corroborated by actual evidence, which is one of the rare ones. What year was it, and where did it take place?
So it was 2004, November 14th. It's really, if you draw San Diego to Ensenada, Mexico, we're about 60 miles off the coast in between the two. We're doing workups, so when we get ready to deploy, this was for the 2005 deployment. We were going at sea for November and December of 2004. So we had been out. I had just taken over the squadron mid-October, so I'd been the CO for a month. So we go out and we're putting the battle group pieces together. So it's not just the air wing, but we're on the carrier. We've got the cruiser. We've got all the support ships out there, and we're going to integrate all the defenses and train as one unit. So the exercise that we're going to do is an air defense exercise where there's good guys, bad guys. They're all from the air wing. So the bad guys today are going to be the Marines, VMFA 232, the Red Devils. So they're going to launch, and they're going to go about 100 miles south of the ship, and we're the good guys, and we call it a 2v2, so it's two of us against two of them. And we're going to work with the USS Princeton, which is going to be the controller, and they're going to control the blue forces, and then the red guys are going to give us a presentation that they're going to try and intercept so we can stop them from getting up towards a carrier. So that's kind of the training set that we're all good. So the Marines take off first, and they start heading to the south. Now, we have no idea that for 2 weeks, the 2 weeks we've been at sea, they've been tracking these things coming out of the sky. And when I talked to the Princeton controller, he's like up to about a dozen of them. They would come down from above 80,000 feet. They'd drop down to about 20,000 feet. They'd hang out, and then they'd go straight back up after about 3 or 4 hours.
Now, when you say they've been tracking them, who specifically?
This is the USS. The Princeton was tracking them. They saw them on the Nimitz radar, and the E2 could see them. Because they're out there, that radar's on all the time. And the Spy 1 system on an Aegis cruiser is, the state-of-the-art, is probably one of the most sophisticated systems in the world.
So typically when something like this happens and there is some unexplained phenomenon, what do they do?
In this case, if we were in a threat environment, they would tell us. But we're off the coast of San Diego. It doesn't come to the air wing. So we have no idea that these things are out there at all.
So they observe these things, and they never bothered telling any of you guys?
That's correct.
So they just knew that these things had been visiting this area,
yes,
but they just allowed this training exercise to take place anyway?
Yeah. Talking to them, for the 2 weeks, they would show up, but it was when we weren't flying. So the typical carrier schedule is, for us, it was about noon to midnight. It's a 12-hour day. There's reasons for that. It can go a lot longer, but for training, we just do the 12-hour day thing. And it's cyclic ops, so you got guys taking off and landing periodically. So we were on one of the first goes. It's noon, 1 o'clock, somewhere around there, and we take off. The Marines take off first, and my buddy Cheeks, who's the CO of the Marine Squadron, he was leading the Red Air. When he launched off the carrier first, they called him up and said, "Hey, what do you got on board?" Well, the original legacy F-18s don't have as much gas as the Super Hornets. Super Hornet's about 30% bigger. So they start talking to him about fuel, and based on how long we're going to be airborne and everything else, they go, "Hey, why don't you just go ahead and proceed to your cap point?" Because we had just taken off. And that's when the controller had come up and said, "Hey," I forget our call sign. It's probably like dealer was usually what we went. So it'd be like dealer 11. This is Princeton Control. What do you got? Say your loadout. And I kind of chuckled. I said, "Well, I got a CATM 9, which is basically just a blue metal tube with a seeker head for an AIM-9 IR missile. It's a training. It doesn't come off the airplane. You can beat it with a sledgehammer. That's the only way you're going to get it off, or you got to unlock the lugs with a key." So I'm like kind of chuckling. He goes, "Well, hey, we're going to cancel the training." So we're like, "Okay." He says, "We got real world vector, and they're going to send us out to the west." So picture if it's, if you got a clock, the Nimitz is in the middle. We're a little bit south of that, about 40 miles south, and then the Marines are about 100 miles south of the ship, about 60 miles between the two of us. So as this is all happening, my wingman is joining up, and these are F-18Fs, so there's 2 people in each jet. So it's me and my Wizzo, which is weapon systems operator, and I've got the other pilot and the weapon systems operator in the other jet. So they tell us all this, "Hey, we're going to real world vector," and they send us out 270, about 60 miles away from where we're going. So now we're going out even further out to sea. We have no idea what we're intercepting, and this is when the controller starts talking to us. He says, "Hey, sir, we've seen these objects. For 2 weeks, they've been coming down," and he's giving us the whole story. He says, "We need you to go investigate. We want to know what these are."
But they're asking you to investigate in a jet that's unarmed.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, we have no... And there's reasons for that we don't fly. We typically don't fly with live ordnance unless we're actually going into like a combat zone or we're on a training range and we're going to shoot something. And the reason is you can go through history of the Navy or Air Force. If you put live missiles on airplanes and then you start doing training where you're squeezing the trigger, someone always messes the switchology up and someone gets shot down. It's happened multiple times. So we don't do it. There's times that we do, but it's rare. So we start flying out to the west. Now I want you to think, because the other pilot has when you talk to, it's out there, it was a female. When you talk to her, here's the kind of goes through the mindset of, hey, we're off the coast of Mexico, real world vector. We have no idea what we're going to look at. Probably drug runner, because you get the drug runners coming up the coast. So we're like, okay. So we drive out, and they're calling down ranges. So they're telling us, hey, it's 270 at 30 miles at 20,000 feet. And it's, and then you just count down the ranges. And we're talking back and forth the whole time. So they get out to a point where they say, hey, merge plot, which means radars have resolution cells, range and azimuth of what the radar can actually see. Once you're inside that box, you can't tell the difference between me and the object I'm going at. We're just become one big blob. So they call merge plot, and so the other jet is on my left-hand side, and I'm going to go to a clock code to make it simple. So the object we're going to end up looking for is right in the middle of the clock, and we are at the 6 o'clock position, and my wingman is off to my left side, so she's further down with her Wizzo. So as we're looking around, we look to the right, and there's yesterday was a perfect example out here. The water is perfectly calm. No white caps. I mean, it's literally a perfect San Diego, California day. And we see whitewater, something like if you see a seamount, rock underwater when you're standing on the shore and the waves are breaking over it and you're like, what is that? It's usually because there's a rock under the water. So it looks like that, but it's about the size of a 737. It actually kind of has a shape of like a cross, and it's pointing to the east. So you've got the long part going east-west, and you got a couple of things going north and south. So as we're looking at it, because that kind of draws our eyes, we're like, oh, that's kind of odd. We look down, and the Wizzo in the other airplane comes up and says, hey, skipper, do you? And that's about what he gets out of his mouth. And I'm kind of looking at the same thing. I go, dude, do you see that? What is that thing? And what we see is this white tic-tac looking object just above the surface of the water, pointing north-south, and it's going north-south, east-west. It's just radically moving forward, back, left, right at will. And it's moving around the disturbance, the whitewater that we see.
How big is this thing?
Over time, it's about 40 feet long. And the way I estimate that is, I got a lot of time fighting other airplanes, so it's about the size of a Hornet, fuselage. So that's why you say 40 feet. And this thing's just going left. So the first thing you see when you look down, you go, and this is with our eyes, it's not sensors, right? So we're looking down at this thing, and first thing you think is helicopter, right? Helicopters typically stay below 200 feet when we're out there, and they're just driving around. We're pretty far away from the ship for a helicopter for one of ours. So what is it? So the first thing you look for is rotor wash. If you've watched any TV show that starts kicking the water up, and you can see that. It's really easy to see from the air. So we're like, no rotor wash. Matter of fact, don't see any rotors. Don't see any tail rotor. Don't see any, the main rotors. We're like, that's kind of weird. So as we're driving around, we're looking at this thing. We get to about the 9 o'clock position.
How far away are you from this thing?
I'm at 20,000 feet, and it's right down on the surface, right off our right side. So I'm probably maybe a couple miles lateral and 20,000 feet, and we're just watching it move around. And
so it's very small in your eyes.
Not overly small. An airplane down that low, it's 40 feet. You can see pretty well. It was pretty clear. So I'm like, okay. So I said, I'm gonna go check it out. That's what we're trained to do. The other pilot says, hey, I'm gonna stay up here, and I'm like, that's perfect. So now we'll get some separation. We'll get it from different views, and the other airplane will kind of have a God's eye view of everything that's going on as I go down and check this thing out. So I start driving around, and it's still doing its forward, back, left, right. It's still pointing north-south. We get to about the 12 o'clock position. I'm just in a nice, easy descent. And a reason, because I've been asked, can you go more aggressive? You can, but when you're out over water, the water looks the same at 20,000 feet as it does at 2,000 feet. You don't, so you can easily put yourself in a non-recoverable position if you're not paying attention and you go into the water. So I got this nice, easy descent. I get to about 12 o'clock, and as I'm coming down, I could guess probably about, 18,000 feet now, a couple thousand feet below the other airplane. The tic-tac just kind of rapidly goes boop and turns, so now it's kind of pointing east-west, and now it mirrors us. So it's above the surface, we're up high, we're coming down, it starts coming up. I'm like, well, this is getting interesting. So we kind of drive all the way around a circle, I'm descending, it's coming up, and I get over to about the 8 o'clock position on the clock, and it's over at about the 2 o'clock position. Well, the quickest way, as we know as kids, to get someone, you can keep going around the circle. Nothing's going to happen. You cut across the circle. So I'm about, I don't know, probably 2,000 to 3,000 feet above it. And I just kind of drop my nose aggressively and I cut across the circle. And it's coming this way. It's because I'm trying to fly to where it's going to be because I want to join on it. I want to see how close I can get to it.
Right.
And as I'm pulling up, it's kind of starting to cross my nose and it starts to accelerate. And within about less than a second, as I start to pull nose onto it and it crosses right in front of me, it just goes poof and it's gone. So I call the other airplane and I said, "Hey, do you guys see that thing?" And they're like, "Sir, it's gone. We don't see it at all." So I'm like, "Okay, that's kind of weird." So we don't see it. We're looking. At the same time, I say, "Hey, let's turn around and let's go back to see what was in the water. Was there something there?" So we turn around. We're right there. We haven't gone anywhere. It's gone. Water's perfectly. There's no white water, nothing. It's just blue. We're like, okay. So we turn back around. Now we're heading back out towards the east. And I tell the controller, I said, I first said, I'm kind of weirded out. And I told my backseater that. And we start heading back. And the controller on the Princeton comes up and he says, "Sir, you're not going to believe this, but that thing is back at your cap point." That was our original point where we were going to hold 40 miles south of the ship. So this thing has went from wherever we were at to about 60 miles in, maybe 30, 40 seconds. It's already over there. And they didn't track it. It just appeared. It shows back up on their radar and they go, "It's here." So we're like, okay. So we fly back. We don't see it. We don't see it on our radar. We don't see it on any of our sensors. We do like 2 runs and we come back to the ship and land. So as we're in we call it the PR shop. We're taking off our flight gear. One of my crews is getting ready to go out, and I think they were going to be on a tanker mission, but they had a targeting pod on board. So they launch off, and we're telling them about this before, and the backseater, Chad, says he's really determined he's going to find this thing. So he tells the pilot, "Hey, we're going to find this thing." So they're just out driving around, and in the back seat of a Super Hornet, there's no stick, but there's side stick controllers, and they're to control the sensors because that's what the weapon systems guys do. And they can change displays really fast by just hitting a button, and it'll flip from the radar to the targeting pod. And the way the system actually works is when you see something on the radar and you designate it as your primary target, all the other sensors will look at that point. So everything is kind of synced together. So he picks up a hit on his radar, and he goes to lock it up because I watched all the tapes. He goes to lock it up, and immediately the radar can tell, it gets signals back that it's being jammed. So, and technically jamming is an act of war. It starts jamming the radar, goes into a jam extrapolate, a bunch of stuff happens on the scope. Well, he's smart enough to castle to his targeting pod, and he takes a passive track, and that's the video that you see of the Tic Tac where it's just sitting in the middle of the screen real quiet. So he does that, and he goes through. If you watch the video, if we had it, I'd go through it with you. But they go through all the different modes. So he goes, it's an IR and an EO. EO is TV. It's black and white TV camera.
We can get the video right online.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, let's get the video, Jamie. Where would you? Can't show it to anybody. We can't show it on YouTube, but you can see it, and people will be able to go to it. You know what we'll do? Go to the video. And we'll tell people when we're starting, and we'll tell people what the title of the video that you get to is, and they can sync it up themselves if they're watching it.
It's publicly owned. Sorry.
Yeah.
It's publicly owned. It's, American government released
Right.
it. So it is actually something in the public domain.
So you think we could play it on YouTube and not get pulled?
Yeah.
100%.
You think so, Jamie?
It's a government.
Those things, I would say, yes, we should be able to, but sometimes those things get messy. So
Let's take a chance.
Okay,
Let's take a chance with this one.
Okay, all right.
I know if you find a New York Times article, there's a link to it.
It's a Pentagon release.
YouTube is crazy with copyright stuff, and we've always been like 2 steps away from getting pulled off of YouTube completely. It's a real disaster. I understand from their perspective. There's a lot of legal issues they have to deal with, but
I have it on a private server. I could maybe send Jamie.
The issue, I believe, though, is the actual copyright of the video itself.
Oh, it's a Pentagon
released public
Okay,
domain.
and the Pentagon's going to come after us.
I don't think so.
I don't think so either. Did you find it?
Yeah, I want to find a good version of the video that doesn't have somebody
Jeremy,
else's
do you
copyright.
know?
Yeah, I've got
Okay.
an unwatermarked version. Let me just look it up and
this
send
one
it
has
to you.
tons of
Jeremy will
watermarks
get
all
it
over
to us.
I have to figure out how to send it to you right here. Give me a second.
Do you have AirDrop? Or could you AirDrop it?
Yeah, but
Do
I
you
got
have
it on
copy of
a page. I got it on a page, a private page. I can send Jamie.
Oh yeah, okay.
Okay.
Okay. Do you have Jamie's info?
No.
Yeah,
Send it.
already done.
Okay. I'll figure it
Or
out.
you
what
can send
guys
it to me and I'll send it to him.
Okay.
That's pretty easy. Sorry to disrupt the momentum.
No, you're good.
But I think it's probably important to be able to have this the video itself, so you could just talk about it. And we're about to yank it up here. Okay, Jamie wrote it down for you. There you go.
Thanks. Give me a second to get it up.
Okay. And for people who don't know, Jeremy also produced Bob Lazar, Area 51 and Flying Saucers, and he was in here when we had Bob Lazar in, talk about Bob's experience, and Jesus, if that wasn't a game changer for me and for a lot of other people. This is a subject that it's so easy to mock. You know, this is why I think it's so important that we talk to people like you, because like I said, just your average everyday UFO crackpot, they believe everything and anything. Had you ever had any UFO experiences before this?
No, the irony, and I tell this story. My mother-in-law, she'll be listening. She literally, every time I would go home, she would ask me, "Hey, did you see a UFO? Did you see a UFO?" And I'd be like, "No." And when I first started dating my wife, she was a big National Enquirer. She had all the supermarket tabloids, and I would always just feed her crap for it. So this happens, and I never say a word. So my friends all knew it was a great story over beers because they'd go, "Hey, what's the coolest thing you ever saw flying?" I go, "I chased a UFO," and they go, "Get out of here!" I go, "No, seriously," and I tell them the story, and they're like, "Dude," I go, "Yeah." So I go home, and I got asked by Lou Elizondo to do the New York Times article, which, as like anything else, I always say no. Like, it took a bunch of times to get me on your show. Jeremy kept asking, and it was...
Thank you, Jeremy.
You got to thank my contractor's wife, Angel, who we were at a party drinking, and she goes, "You got to do Rogan." I go, "What?" She goes, "It's the biggest podcast on the planet." She goes, "You got to do it." And I go, "All right, I'm going to do it. Just for you, I'm going to do this show." So
shout out to Angel.
Yeah, from New Hampshire. So... So my mother-in-law, we're sitting there, and I know the New York Times article is going to come out, and so it was at Thanksgiving when the article came out, 17. So it was Thanksgiving in 2017, and everyone had kind of left the house, so it's just my wife and my in-laws. A couple of us sitting in the kitchen, and I said, "Hey, I got to tell you guys this." They said, "What?" I said, "There's going to be this article comes out in the New York Times, and I'm in it." And they're like, "Yeah." I go, "Well, I chased a UFO." My mother-in-law's like, "Ha ha!" She looks at my father-in-law. He's rolling his eyes, looking at me like, "Oh, are you serious?" And I go, "Yeah, oh, yeah." And she's like, "You never told us." I go, "I never really told anyone." I mean, my wife and kids knew the event happened, but they didn't have all the details because it's just one of those things I just didn't get into.
Is it classified?
No.
Or was it at any point in time?
No, there's a lot of rumors out there that it was classified and the ship got locked down. No, it wasn't. We were never, men in suits did not show up. No one told us not to talk about it. And this is because there's a lot of other people saying other things. And I said, look at it. Here's the context. So in the battle group, you've got the admiral, you got the captain of the ship, the captain of the Princeton, and then you've got the other COs. So in position-wise, I'm probably, as a CO of a squadron, in the top 20 out of 6,000. And no one came to talk to me. No one came to take my tapes. No one showed up in a suit. No one told me not to talk. No one talked to any of my air crew that were involved in this. There were 6 people total involved, the 2 that shot the video and the 4 of us that looked at it for 5 minutes with our eyes. No one, nothing. It just, and I can get into how, there's a report that George Knapp got released. I call it the unofficial official report. And I had met someone, and I'm like, "Hey, can you find anything out? I had this incident." And normally you tell people this, they look at you like, "Dude, what are you smoking?" And I'm like, no, I'm good. I'm tested. And they go, and they said, "Well, let me see what I can do." And I had got a call. I was doing some aerospace work, and I had gotten a call on my cell phone from a guy. And he said, "Hey, I want to investigate your incident." And I go, "Okay." So he did. He investigated the incident, and it was very, very thorough. I mean, if you've read it's about 10 pages long. And he tracked down everybody. He tracked down all the people that were the air crew that were involved. He tracked down the admiral. It was a pretty thorough report. And I didn't think anything of it, because the people worded it's out there, so they want to do FOIA, but it was never released in a FOIA request. I actually had the Navy call me. I'd been out of the Navy for like 6 years, and
let's explain to people that means Freedom of Information Act.
So I got called by a public affairs person from the Navy and said, "Hey, is this Commander Fravor?" And I said, "Yeah." And they said, "Hey, do you know of any documentation on your UFO incident off the Nimitz. And I said, official. And she said, yeah. I said, no, because I knew the report existed, but to me it was an unofficial because I didn't know where it went. And I had a copy of it, but because it wasn't official, well then years later I find out that the guy who actually did the report was part of the ATIP team. And I was talking to Lou Elizondo, who runs that program, and Lou showed me the documentation of the original. I think it's like 13 people that were part of ATIP, and they were FOIA exempt. And I'm like, well, that's kind of, well, hey, I know that guy. He's the guy that did the report, which is why it never ever came out until George got his hands on it.
How is something Freedom of Information Act exempt?
Obviously, DOD has the ability, because I'm not a conspiracy theory person at all. I mean, I'll just tell you that. And I think there's reasons that the government doesn't tell the public everything. And I don't speak for the government, but I think there's a good reason for that not everything needs to go out to the public. But most of it does. And what they do is they put a clause on, hey, for this program or whatever we're doing, which would have been an ATIP program, the work that they do and what they find it's not releasable through Freedom of Information Act. There's probably other avenues to get that. And then you go, well, what really is freedom of information? Because I got into this I was talking to someone who's a conspiracy theorist, and they said, well, so-and-so wrote, and they're not getting any information on your event. I said, so what are they going to do? They're going to call up, you're going to put in your request for freedom of information. You go, here's what I want. It goes to some poor guy at the Pentagon who's like, I have no idea what this is. And he searches around, he doesn't find anything. He looks at his bud, and I go, for you, I go, hey, Joe, you got anything on the Nimitz incident? And you go, nope. And I go, okay, well, I didn't find anything. I looked. I did my due diligence, but I'm not going to spend the next 6 months of my life doing your research project for you.
Right.
So and you get nothing, and then you assume the government's covering up when the government really isn't. They just, the guys doing the research doesn't know where it's at or doesn't have access to it. So.
Makes sense. Jamie, we have the video? Okay. Here we go. Now, explain what are we seeing and why are we seeing it in this particular
Okay,
shade?
so we'll just kind of go around. So if you look at the OPRs operate in the top left corner. NAR is narrow field of view, which is zoomed in. IR at the top middle, it means it's in infrared mode. So instead of seeing color, you're seeing temperature variations. Okay. And these things are extremely sensitive to within like tenths of degrees. They will tell you the difference due to color. So it'll go from black to white. So in this case, white is hot. So if you look down in the bottom left corner, it says WHT. That's white. It means white is hot. So the object that you're looking at is hotter than the sky around it. But what you also notice is there's no plumes. Now, if you're looking at an airplane, when you get closer, you'll actually see the exhaust coming out, and there will be a really glowing plume. That's important as we look at the video. And then most of the stuff on here you really don't need to know. What you can look at is the bottom right corner. It says 19,990 and a B. That's the altitude. And if you look up in the little words where it says HDG and then BALT, it's autopilot. So it's on altitude hold. It's just flying for that. So you can go ahead and play the video. And so those two bars next to the white object, that's a passive track. So what he's done is he's commanded the FLIR to track that. So what the system does is it uses, it's actually tracking, it can track pixels, and it's just basically block those hot pixels, those white pixels from the black ones. And then you're going to see now, pause it real quick. So up at the top, see it went to a white screen with the black object. This is a black and white TV mode. And if you look at the top, it says TV. So narrow in TV mode is actually, you can get closer than narrow in IR. It's literally narrow in IR is about medium in TV mode. So you can get closer with the TV mode. So as you look at it now, in this case, you would actually start to see stuff going on. And even in TV mode, because you get exhaust, the black exhaust that comes out, you'll usually be able to see kind of some of that coming out of the back, and you don't see anything. This thing's just sitting there. And if you look at the top where it says 3 right, that's the pod is looking 3 degrees right of the nose of the airplane, right? So he's just flying along. The bottom numbers, don't worry, those are time. So it's 41:56. So go ahead and hit play. And what he's doing is Chad's going through all the different modes because he's like, oh, I got it. And he's going to try and see the best video that he can get. Now, there's rumors that this video is like 10 minutes long. No, what you're looking at is the entire video. Now, notice where it says 99.9. So hit pause real quick. What that means is while he's got the targeting pod, because that's his primary sensor right now, the radar is still trying to look at this object and trying to range it, and the radar can't get ranging on it. So the object is doing something to say, I'm not giving you back, because it's just a Doppler radar, just like a police radar is a Doppler. It's trying to get a ranging on you, and it can't do it. So when it says 99.9, the radar cannot see this object right now. It's not allowing it to get ranging.
And I think that's super important, Dave, the way he explained it to me. Active jamming compared to passive jamming. This is a technology that is actively jamming this system.
rather than something like stealth aircraft, which is the shape and the
he should
texture of
explain.
the.
Yeah, it's
You and I have some shared interests, clearly, in the world of UFOs. But I want to talk. Most people know of you because of Bigelow Aerospace. They know that you're this billionaire investor and you're a very successful businessman. But you have a deep fascination with UFOs.
Yeah, sure do.
How did this all get started?
Back when when I was about 3 years old, which would be about 1947, and actually of May of that year, my grandparents had a very close encounter that was dramatic. And they were taking an evening drive in the late afternoon up into the mountains and coming on back down to Las Vegas. And they saw what appeared to be at first an airplane on fire. And the object became closer and closer to them, and they pulled off to the side of the road. And at one point, then it filled up the windshield, and they thought they were going to die. And at the last second, it shot off and disappeared. And I learned of this story when I was probably 10 years old, and because I was 3 at the time, and my mother had told me the story. So I approached my grandfather, and he wouldn't talk about it. Now, after all these years, like 7 years have gone by, because I was intrigued with it. And so I went to my grandmother, and she only would say a few words, but she wouldn't talk. So I got the story from my mom, and my grandfather had to sit on the side of the road there in the car for a while to recompose himself, and because they thought they were going to die, and then he finally was able to drive on back to Las Vegas. So that was the beginning for me.
Did he ever describe what you said? It looked like a plane on fire, but like, what was the shape of it as it got closer?
I don't recall any kind of shape that my mother described. I don't recall that.
But they just knew it wasn't a plane. They knew it was something.
That's right.
Something
That's right.
crazy.
So in the family, the family had an event, and I lived right next door to my grandparents, and the family had an event that kind of started things at that date. For me, other personal things came later, but for the family, that was a big deal.
So this was, you said 47?
47.
And 47 was the time of the Roswell crash. 47 was a time there was a lot of UFO activity being observed worldwide. And the speculation is that this had to do with the nuclear bombs that were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki and all the tests that the United States had done and Russia had done, and that there was a lot of interest in obviously in that. Well, actually, Russia hadn't dropped any bombs by that time, right?
Right.
It was after that, but
Right.
that there was interest in our species by extraterrestrials because they let these crazy assholes are detonating nukes. Like let's go take a look at them.
Right. Well, you had so-called Foo Fighters during the war, these lights that were following bombers, and the tail gunners were the ones that saw them most often, of course, and that happened through the war, and then of course Roswell, but before that was Ken Arnold, right? In about June-ish, and then in July 8th was Roswell.
And there's a direct uptick though from the Trinity experiments, right?
I think I gather my feeling simply is that without any kind of other evidence or proof that was a huge stimulus. Yeah.
So this was around that time, and you had heard about this as a part of, family discussions,
Right.
And so that sort of ignited the fire initially.
Yeah. And I started asking my friends, as I say, when I was about 10, have you any reports in your family of anything? And by golly, a couple of my close friends told me things that they had never told me before. So that wasn't necessarily an exclusive event, is what I'm saying. Other people in Las Vegas had seen things at close proximity as well.
Now, your relationship to this is obviously something that you've carried for so long. It's been an obsession of yours for so long.
Yeah, yeah.
It started with this, but what personal experiences, if any, have you had?
Well, when I was probably 7 or 8, I used to have what I chalked up all my life to just being silly dreams. And I had maybe 5 or 6 of these dreams, and I could never make sense of them. And I would be laying in bed on my side, and typical dream, always the same. There would be 3 short somethings in a kind of monk robe, and so I couldn't see any face, couldn't see any appendages. And these 3 whatevers were standing there, and they were not too far from my eye level as far as the heights and so forth.
So these like child size?
Yeah. And so there was nothing I was an avid comic book reader, but there was nothing in the whole genre of comic books that related to that, or movies. And we didn't have television in Las Vegas till 53 or 54. And even after that, it was terrible broadcasting, at first. But so it made no sense to me. And so over my lifetime, I never mentioned it to anybody, including my wife. It's funny how you keep things secret, and just kind of for no good reason. Maybe I was be embarrassed to talk about it. But I finally thought, well, maybe it was just dreams. Maybe it was something else. And so that was a first event personally that I had at that time in the subject.
When did you start to connect the idea of these tiny people or human-like things with extraterrestrials?
Well, years later, when I began to start my process as a researcher and as a student in the subject, and began to talk with people who made it their business to be experts in abductions, and the more I got into the field and sat writing out questions for the researcher, for the therapist who would be asking the questions, and I'd be sitting there watching the process. And just over time, I thought, well, maybe there was something more to it, but I'm better off not knowing anything, so I'll just block it off and forget about it.
Yeah, we talked last night about John Mack a little bit, the Harvard.
A great guy.
Yeah. And he did a lot of these sort of hypnotic regression sessions with people where they describe very similar scenarios.
A multitude of different situations. The abduction phenomena was very proliferate in the population, it seemed like. Even we did a survey called the Roper Poll, and we repeated it 3 times so that the margin of error was really reduced to like 1.5%. And abduction researchers came up with the 10 questions, and so we distributed that, and the conclusion was a fairly relatively sizable percentage of the population had some kind of experiences, according to them, according to the researchers, and according to the poll. I am not qualified to speak to the accuracy of whether the questions were that relevant to the conclusions or not, but that's what they said. And and I had in my own research found people that I put them through a regression, not personally, but I found a hypnotherapist that could do that, and I found a number of people just here, there, scattered around, maybe somebody in my own staff, and they would come up with these stories and these events.
One of the criticisms of John Mack and hypnotic regression in general is that the idea that you can put a memory into someone's head, that you could suggest things and you could create false memories. And this was something that I've read in the criticism of his work, that this style of hypnotic regression and bringing up these very specific scenarios to a bunch of different people, you can sort of help create, especially in people that are easily influenced or people that are open to suggestion. You could put these false memories in their head. And so, you know, especially when you're dealing with something as fantastic as a
Right.
UFO or
Right.
alien abduction or visitation or something like
Right.
that.
Oh, that's definitely possible. There's also something called screen memory, but dealing with the power of suggestion. That's absolutely true. But my experience was with different hypnotherapists, they went out of their way. In fact, maybe if they did make a suggestion, it was just the opposite. They might say, okay, you're on board this craft. You know, where's the lighting coming from? Is it coming from the corner or of the room that you're in? Well, there were no corners, and they'd be corrected right away by the person being hypnotized. And so they went just the opposite direction on purpose to make suggestions to maybe coax the person to come that direction, and they wouldn't do it. The person wouldn't do it. Now, screen memory is different. Supposedly, if somebody has a very close encounter with supposedly somebody that's ET, you leave that the memory turns out to be entirely different, and that's put into you consciously, and you recall something entirely different than what actually happened. Maybe you saw two deer on the road, or
Right.
something of that sort, or maybe there were owls or whatever. So that's what's purported to be.
I mean, when you see these the Pentagon's talking about it, when, you know, intelligent officials, you ever wonder whether or not it's disinformation?
Yeah. You want to
Go ahead.
So yeah, I'll take that first. Yeah, I've heard you kind of talk about that a bunch,
Yeah.
you know, and I think it's a very healthy suspicion to have. My perspective is a little different in that people are always coming at me with fake information, like every day, all the time. But the people in government that we have been able to kind of interface with, I wish there was an adult in the room. I wish that this was orchestrated through the media. It would give me some sort of hope that someone has some sort of control on this, and that has not been my experience.
Okay, what is your experience? Like, what's your impression of how it's all happening?
It's a big question. I don't know where to start on that, but here's what I know. I know that there are people in government that want some level of disclosure on whatever this is without defining it. Just there should be oversight. So I know that to be true. There are good people that think that people are running amok and there must be oversight, not just financially, but if these types of technologies actually exist.
Right, who's in control of them and why? And
Yeah.
who has access to them and why?
I mean, we have a history of disinformation and misinformation put out to the public and to Congress by the intelligence community, by the Pentagon. They lie all the time. It's part of the turf. It's part of the job. But for them to then go into closed door briefings with members of Congress, with the oversight committees who handle their budgets, for them to lie about that, that's another matter. And I don't think they would because they could get busted for it. A lot of stuff is coming out now, and I know we get asked all the time, who's behind this push? You know, it looks like it's one big movement as opposed to a bunch of different things that all happened in approximately the same time. It's kind of been organic. Different people have come forward, and it encourages other people to come forward as opposed to somebody doing a master manipulation of the whole thing.
What resistance is there to this information getting out?
There's resistance on like multiple levels. So despite what you believe to be true or not true, the big question is, are we going to be able to verify some of these claims? That's all I care about, right? If we're back engineering some of these craft, then I believe that we should have the discovery process to find out if things like what David Grush has said under oath, that he has literally put his well-being and his safety on the line for, if that is true, then we have a duty to find out. So the pushback comes from many levels. There's stigma. It's fucking huge, dude. Like it is political toxicity for some of these senators to even, you know, people don't want to know, they don't want me to say I ever talk with them. It's like a toxic environment politically, the UFO thing.
Because everybody thinks it's bullshit, or you're a loon if you believe it. But
It's
not
just-
everybody, but quite a few people.
Not just that. It doesn't help you get reelected, man.
Right.
And then when you start poking the bear and going into the oversight committees and the Senate Intelligence Committee and the, all these things, they're like, whoa, 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 this is our territory. Why are you, as Congress, pushing on us? Why are you doing that? Like, this is our job. We have clearances. So there's
Right.
that kind of pushback too.
You look back at the beginning of the cover-up, why did it happen? Why did it start? Well, if 1947, this gigantic wave of UFOs suddenly appear. You got Kenneth Arnold, you got Roswell, hundreds of sightings all over. We'd just come out of World War II, and our military is faced with a new threat that they really don't know what the hell it is. They start looking at it and try to figure it out, but they can't. So they sort of painted themselves into a corner of secrecy. Nobody wants to admit, if you're a president or chairman of the Joint Chiefs, there's something flying in our atmosphere, and we can't control it. We can't even catch it. We can't detect it on radar. There's not much we can do. They don't want to admit that. Secondly, I think what was told to me by a Senate intelligence guy who was a chief staffer who oversaw black budget operations. He had come out to Area 51 looking into the Lazar stuff years ago, early 90s. And he told me, look, if this is true, if this cover-up is going on, if they are diverting millions of dollars, maybe hundreds of millions of dollars from legitimate national security programs to keep this cover-up going, as he suspected there were, then somebody's going to go to prison. When it comes out, they'd go to prison. I think we heard Dave Grush speaking before this House committee in late July, in which he talked about special access programs, hundreds of millions of dollars being funneled into them. Nothing ever comes out. Congress has no oversight. Congress doesn't even know they exist. That's the kind of thing you could send somebody to prison if and when it comes out. And then the final reason, we can only speculate about it, maybe there really is a big secret. I wonder about it. If I was told, here's the real deal, here's what's going to happen if this comes out, society will collapse. It is so overwhelming, so disturbing that it would hit the fan, that everybody'd freak out. Maybe there is something like that. I don't know. But it gets dangerous for us to allow military folks to decide, I can know it, but you can't. Dad can know, but mom and the kids can't know. I don't like that.
Yeah,
I'd like to be able to know myself.
I don't like it either, but why do they think that society would collapse?
There was a Brookings Institute study that was done in 1960 where they looked at it. And, let's say it was confirmed that we came out and admitted that extraterrestrials are here. And they speculated, in looking at sociological matters, that social institutions would collapse. Do people want to still pay their taxes? Do they want to go to work? It was so overwhelming. The fact that we, a lesser species, have been discovered by something more intelligent. We know from human history how that works out. When the Europeans come to North America, we know what happens to the people who are already here, the less developed society. They collapse. They were wiped out. And I think that was the projection of that study. The only way to get around that, they said, is to prepare for it over a long period of time, to condition folks to get ready for it. Now, I don't know if there was ever a policy where they instituted that, but it kind of looks like it. All the UFO and alien movies and TV shows and X-Files this and books and reports and children's cartoons, it almost looks like we've been conditioned to get ready for it over the last 60 years.
What do you think about all this stuff about, the New York Times had articles about it. There's Air Force test pilots have come out talking about encountering flying saucers. Mm-hmm. Or unidentified flying objects, particularly Commander Fravor, who had that
David
tic-tac
Fravor
thing. Yeah. What do you think about all that?
Yeah, we do. I'm a shameless marketer. We do an episode on that, on ATIP, on the Advanced Aviation Threat Identification Program. And look, again, I always say the same thing. I'm not a conspiracy guy. I tend to be very cynical about everything, but. After talking to some of these folks, including Fravor and a handful of others who were both pilots and also were involved in the ATIP program for the U.S. government, for the military, there's things out there that we haven't been able to identify, right? And I'm not jumping on the alien train, right? Necessarily, but what I'm saying is that there are things that extremely experienced pilots, military pilots with significant amounts of experience couldn't figure out, couldn't identify, right? And so I'm certainly not going to be smart enough to say, okay, this is what it was. Was it a foreign government's experimental aircraft? Was it something? I don't know. But what I do know is that the U.S. government took it seriously enough that they developed their own internal program within the Pentagon to try to sort out the wheat from the chaff, right? And say, okay, what do we actually have to worry about? In part because it's a national security issue, right? If there is a aircraft, or if there's something up there that a military pilot sees, for instance, that they can't identify, all right, well, we have an obligation to figure out what that is, because if it's a hostile foreign government's efforts to develop, craft that we don't know about, or propulsion systems we don't know about, then yes, we should be working on that issue. The problem has always been that once you talk about that, then people immediately go, "Oh, aliens, huh? Area 51," and it kind of gets dismissed.
Yeah.
But there was a much more serious effort than I knew about before I started working on this thing, and. So I don't know. I think I've got an open mind about that. It's like that old thing about how can we really be the only people out here, right? Or life forms out here. I don't know. That seems a little obscure for me to believe.
It seems unrealistic.
Yeah. So, but
when a guy
Fravor,
like Fravor,
yeah.
that's the thing. When someone who's that rock solid comes out and tells the story, and he's not deviating from his story. He's not a guy who's trying to make money. He's just, and he doesn't have a history of telling fantastic stories.
And he knew what it meant when he was going to come forward and talk about this. And you've got the gun cameras, and you've got the radar operators who also saw the same thing.
They saw it, and they said it was actively jamming their radar.
Yeah.
Which they say, what the fuck? And then the way it moved from 60,000 feet down to like 200 feet in like less than a second.
Yeah, and no signs of any propulsion system.
Yeah.
No, there's several things about that leave you scratching your head. Again, I'm not making a case one way or the other. The point of this is to kind of use the money trail as a way to get inside some of these programs, and then to the degree that you can, without to the degree that you can talk about things that are declassified. Not necessarily try to make a case. We're not trying to say it is this or it is that, but I think we're presenting a lot of interesting information that, again, with this situation with Fravor as an example, you come away from it and you think, okay, I'm not dismissing anything at this point. Just it would be I think foolish to or anyway. So interesting stuff. But
was that ever anything that came up during your career?
No, I was pretty much straightforward. Pound the ground through some counterinsurgency operations, counter-narcotics, counter-terrorism operations. We never did any counter-alien things. So right, that was a different operation. That was on a floor we weren't allowed to go onto at the headquarters.
It seems like if we had to admit it was real, if it was something that was real, and we were being contacted on a regular basis, or at least a semi-regular basis, that would change the way everybody feels about everything.
Yes.
Remember when Reagan gave that speech?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I think it was the United Nations. He said, imagine how easily we would come together if we were faced with a threat from an alien world.
Right.
And everybody was like, oh my God, he knows something.
Yeah.
The aliens.
He's about to spill the beans.
Yeah, that's what we were hoping.
No,
all the UFO dorks like myself.
Well, but think about it. I mean, think if that did come out, which is what part of the allure, right, is the idea that, the government's been keeping this from us for all these years, and you think about what that would mean, not just obviously, oh my God, really, there's something going on out there, but then sort of that breakdown in trust, not that it's not happening already in terms of the government and its ability to, play square. But look, Area 51. Area 51 was scouted out for use as an experimental, test site for aircraft. And, made perfect sense. Well, then you get all these experimental aircraft being developed out there and flown, some successfully, some not. And, locals, see this shit, locals being a fairly good-sized region because of the distance on these. And, it's understandable how you start getting some of these stories. But, having said that, I sat down with Fravor, right? We talked about this a lot for this one episode, and I talked to several others. And again, I come away and I'm not sure what to think, but again, I'm not closing the book on anything at this point.
See, the way I looked at it is if these were unique expeditions from another planet, or whatever it is that comes here, some alien spacecraft, all they'd have to do is come here once. or twice.
Get fed up. Just
Well,
say,
not
"Ah,
even that,
ugh."
but I used to have a bit about it, how Earth is the Tijuana of outer space. They only come down here when they're fucked up and they want to see a show. That's why they don't stay. They just come down and they go, what the
That's
fuck?
it.
Like, no one's doing any science expeditions to Tijuana.
I'm not going back there. No way. Not unless I'm drunk again.
Yeah. Well, I was just thinking that if they were going to come down here and examine us, I mean, they could just do it a couple of times and people have these stories and everybody else dismisses it. Like, where are they? Where are they? I don't see any aliens.
Yeah.
Because you really wouldn't. And you probably don't. And if they're capable of moving at the speed that Fravor described, where it was just impossible to track with the human eye. Like,
They're not going to view us as a threat.
no.
Yeah. They're not
I
going
don't
to.
think they think we're a threat. I think
Yeah.
they're just, I don't know.
They're not going to look at us and say, we want to steal their technology.
It's the most
You know.
fascinating thing to me. Out of all the weird what ifs and who could do this and how could that be true, the alien one is the most fascinating. Because if that was real, and if we somehow or another one day get some undeniable proof, like the Fravor film, the film footage, the gunner footage, the radar footage, that's pretty goddamn compelling. But man, if there was something like
Yeah.
off the chart,